Greetings all, this is Harry Nick. How you guys going? It's time to have a look at some more X-Wing 2nd Edition lists. And I thought this week let's have a look at a few ACES, one for each faction, that's really caught my attention and all of your attention as well, by the looks of the lists you've been submitting anyway. So I thought, hey, let's have a look at a couple of iconic characters and a scum pilot, but particularly iconic characters which were really popular in the movies, were really integral to the story, probably none more so than the two characters we look at first, but didn't do so great in first edition for whatever, their design wasn't fully fleshed out. Remember that in the case of particularly the core characters from the original trilogy, they came out wave 1, 2, 3, and the way X-Wing sort of evolved, either through power creep or just trying to solidify the kind of design that does well in the meta, FFG didn't really have everything down pat to start off with, which is fair enough. It was a brand new game back then, but going into second edition, it's very clear from what we've heard from the designers that they want these iconic characters being played. They want to make sure they are relevant, they're powerful, and I think that's definitely going to be the case. Now, before we start, I do want to point out something very, very cool. When you guys submitted your list last week and we did that video, there were a couple of list builders floating around, which can be used as a sort of interim list builder before the official app comes out. However, in the last week, yet another squad builder, my favorite squad building app from first edition, have added an updated second edition squad builder. I'll put it up here on the screen for you guys to see. This squad builder is fantastic, you guys. Seriously, if you haven't tried, do it. It works great on a computer. It works great on a mobile phone. There's no app for it. You just go to the website and it's just really intuitive and easy to use. And it outputs XWS files that you can use for tournaments and that kind of stuff. So really solid. Go check it out. A really good tool to use to send me squads. Actually, while I have this video recording, I have yet another squad builder open on my computer so I can check these changes as I'm talking about them. It just makes this whole thing a lot easier. It makes list building a lot easier. So yep, go check it out. And let's start out with these lists. Let's talk about the character Luke Skywalker, a pilot which really unfortunately didn't perform well in first edition, but he should have. He's Luke Skywalker. He's iconic, probably the most iconic character in Star Wars. So let's have a look at this list here. Skyrissian by Thomas Orest. And thank you, Thomas. I noticed you posted an updated version of this list. I have used the most updated version that you submitted. We have Luke Skywalker here with the servo motor S-foils, proton torpedoes, R5D8 and instinctive aim. And we have Lando Calrissian in the Millennium Falcon with Nien Nunb, Jyn Erso, Bistan and the Millennium Falcon title. And this list is really, really interesting. Actually, just apart from Luke, I am absolutely hyped for Lando. I think he has a much better design. Well, it's not really a different design moving in second edition. It's just a bit more of a push in the power level. He has a bit more reach with the ability. Plus, it works at range 0, which means he can also do this to himself. And the way you've set up Lando in particular means you have a lot of flexibility and a lot of action economy in this list. It's weird because the way Luke Skywalker operates, he is this super versatile ace, which almost feels like the kind of thing you'd be doing on the Empire faction, but it still feels like it has rebel overtones. Basically, Lando, whenever he does a green maneuver, can give either Lando or Luke, assuming Luke's close enough, an action. Nien Nunb makes all of your banks green, so you have a lot of agency to do that quite easily. Now let's talk about some of the upgrades on Lando, because I think this is probably the area where there is a bit of flexibility. Millennium Falcon title I don't think is a super great use of 6 points. I don't think it's bad. I just think overall with Bistan, you're going to want to be focusing with Lando to make sure you get those double shots. Now, yes, you can get 2 actions with Lando if he does a green maneuver. He could, say, do a focus action, then do an evade action. Then you've got Bistan and the Falcon title working together. However, if you do that, you can't boost, you can't move your arc and that kind of stuff. And it really limits the options. Now, you do have a lot of flexibility here, but by doing that, you can't do all these important things. You can't give Luke any actions. So maybe there's an argument to say that you don't want to be doing both of these things. However, you can always do one of these things pretty easily. Either activate the Millennium Falcon title or use Bistan, and they both feel really, really good. Plus, I really like Jyn Erso here. The fact that you can give Luke evade tokens feels like a very strong move. The fact that you can further give him actions feels strong overall. He can barrel roll natively. He can boost if his S-foils are closed, which is also another cool thing about this list, is Luke and Lando are both at initiative 5, so you can activate them in whatever order you want. So that means you could say, for example, if Luke has his S-foils closed, you could use Lando to boost him, then Luke could open his S-foils before he activates, and then use a different action, maybe a focus which turns into an evade. Maybe Luke needs to move into a certain position and boost after he moves, and that way Luke could activate first, move into that position, and Lando could use his ability to make Luke do a boost or even a barrel roll and all that kind of stuff. The fact that you can choose what order these guys fly in fact, that in general, if you can pilot skill match or initiative match across your entire list, is always a good thing, full stop. The fact that there is so much utility on the back of it in this list really makes me like what you're doing here, Thomas. I love the thinking here. Now, the only change I definitely would make on Luke, you've got R5D8. I'd use R2D2 personally. I think regenerating shields, although you do get disarm tokens, I think that's a bit more relevant. It is a little bit dangerous kind of relying on Luke getting damage into his hull. That is a tad risky. You could start a turn not having any damage on your hull and then being completely wiped out. With R2-D2 you can regenerate shields and give yourself a bit more flexibility. He's far more likely to need to regenerate shields than to repair hull. It's a lot less riskier waiting that long as well. And I think the downside of getting a disarm token isn't the end of the world in that regard. Considering all of Luke's repositioning ability, his force tokens, and the ability to unlock his actions through Lando, I think having a disarm token every now and then, trying to get away and then re-engage the next turn, isn't going to be so painful. Plus, it's another action that Lando wants to be activating. And I think just in general, in terms of this entire list, there's so many options for Lando in terms of using his ability. It's almost an embarrassment of riches. I don't think you really need to give Lando any more actions. So R5D8 and the Millennium Falcon title are both great, but holy moly, he's always going to have an option for that ability. Don't worry, there's plenty of cool stuff. So I'd definitely change R5D8. I'd leave the Falcon title on, to be honest. I don't think there's too many much better options. I really like Bastan. I think he's going to be an extremely powerful gunner. I really like these two pilots together. My gut instinct tells me probably Lando will be better alongside a couple of other ships, but the fact that you've got such a well built out Luke Skywalker and they're initiative matched and there's just so much utility going on here, this looks really, really powerful. You have to try this and tell me how it goes. Okay, an Empire list using Darth Vader. This list is by Scott Duncan. We have Vader and a couple of generic Inquisitors. Vader has supernatural reflexes, stealth device, collision detector, cluster missiles, and both of the Inquisitors has heightened perception and collision detector. And I just want to talk about heightened perception for a start, because I'm not super high on this card. I don't think the payoff you get for using your force slot is really good enough. However, I will say that in this list, this is probably the best thing heightened perception could ever do. Basically, in this list, it means you're probably going to shoot with all three ships before your opponent gets a chance to respond, which means you can take a ship off the table, potentially in the first round of shooting. And that's probably the best thing you can do with heightened perception. There's always going to be instances late in the game where, say, you have one Inquisitor versus a ship that has a higher initiative, but heightened perception means you get that one extra shot. First, you take them off, but that's not going to happen every single game. The fact that you can capitalize off it across all three ships in the early game, I think is probably the best thing you can be doing with this card. But I will say overall, with generic Inquisitors, I feel like there is better things we could be doing with that force slot. Also with Vader, we have supernatural reflexes, and I don't really love this. The fact of the matter is he can't use that boost without hurting himself, and when he hurts himself he loses stealth device, which is not ideal. It's really cool that he can do a barrel roll before he moves, but if he does, he can't use a barrel roll after he moves. I will say though, it is really cool that Vader can do a barrel roll before he moves, and then he can start chaining his own actions using his force tokens. Yeah, there's a bit more upside there. It's kind of like a quasi-advanced sensors. But I feel like the downside from that boost is enough to convince me I probably don't think this is really at home with Vader. I like what you're doing with Collision Detector as well across all three ships. Again, this is a great utility card to have across three ships. I will say overall with these kind of platforms that the dial is so good that you can just avoid rocks. We see it in first edition. Imperial ACES just taking the biggest rocks they have in their collection. It works really, really well. Look, Collision Detector might mean you can fly through a rock on one particular turn and have great utility, but it's not going to work all the time. I don't feel like this is going to be as good as it is like with the Mining Guild tie when that comes out. Cluster Missiles, I will say, is awesome on Vader. It means he has a lot of really potent utility at range 1 to 2. I am going to suggest a few things to change here. First of all, I would suggest instead of Collision Detector on Vader, we take Fire Control Systems. He's already going to want to have target locks to use cluster missiles, and that reroll is going to be fantastic if he has a target lock. It means he doesn't have to spend them. Plus, with cluster missiles, you have 2 attacks, so you can use that benefit twice, which is really, really cool. I'm going to suggest that we take off Supernatural Reflexes on Vader, and just as a suggestion to put on instead, I'm going to suggest Sense, because we have a lot of great utility with Sense. Sense gives us the ability to have a look at our opponent's dial before they fly, and more importantly, before our Inquisitors fly. They are relatively low initiative. In a lot of your games, you're going to find that there are pilots with higher initiative, and the fact that they have 2 repositioning abilities means they can block very effectively if they know where your opponent's ship's going to fly. It also means that they can potentially arc dodge before your opponent's ship flies, which is another really potent thing. And if we do that, and we take off Collision Detectors off the Inquisitors, we can actually put 2 copies of Supernatural Reflexes in this list, 1 on each of those Inquisitors. And I think alongside Sense, that just has so much utility. You will never take damage off Supernatural Reflexes with these Inquisitors. I think this card alone on the Inquisitor is a very powerful build. Unfortunately, it's 52 points, so you can't do a 4-off build like this. But a 2-off build next to Vader. It also makes the point cost of all 3 ships slightly approach parity. The fact that Vader is so much more expensive because he's taking Supernatural Reflexes makes him a much juicier target. And I just feel, in my opinion, leaning into this kind of strategy has more utility overall and more potential for explosiveness. You're still going to be able to attack effectively with all 3 ships. But I will say, Scott, using the Collision Detectors on all 3 ships and Heightened Perception, you've got a couple of really neat tricks up your sleeve that's very unique. It's not really like anything we've seen in first edition, so if you can capitalize off those abilities, you're going to have a very fun time. I just argue that there are other options here, and I like action economy overall personally in my flying, so bottom line, I really like these 3 pilots together. I think it's going to be a very interesting archetype. Generic Inquisitors in general have got me really excited to do some list building. Hopefully when the Galactic Republic come out, we get some generic Jedi as well, so we can have similar kind of builds. Okay, let's move on to the last list we have here. This one's by Curtis Liddiard. And this is a droid build for the Scum faction, and I want to talk about Guri in particular. This has IG-88A, 4-LOM, and Guri. IG-88A has Trick Shot Advanced Sensors, 4-LOM has no upgrades, and Guri has Predator and Advanced Sensors. And this is interesting because this totals 200 points right out of the gate. And I have to say, I look at all 3 of these ships and I think they're all just a bit too underdone for my liking. And I did make this comment when we had all the points revealed. It does look like on the surface it is viable to fly these 3 guys together, but having a look at it on paper, I just don't feel like any of them are quite there just yet. There's no cannons on IG-88A, there's no utility with 4-LOM to extra stress himself. I'd love, for example, a copy of Elusive on him, but we just can't fit it in there. And on Guri, she's an awesome, powerful ace. I love advanced sensors on Guri. I wouldn't take any other sensor slot. But Predator, I don't know. I feel like I'd much prefer something like Lone Wolf on her to have a bit of defense as well, but it just doesn't work out. I will say, though, that what we have here is very close to the old meta list Paratani. And Paratani was a list that used MindLink on 3 ships, Asajj Ventress, Fen Rao, and Manaru. And that list worked really well before Manaru got her nerf and she could use her ability at infinite range. But it was basically just 3 solid platforms passing around focus tokens, and that's essentially what's going on here. The 3 platforms we have is an Aggressor, a G1A Starfighter, and a Star Viper, and they seem pretty solid, especially moving in 2nd edition. The G1A and the Star Viper in particular seem to be doing really well. May I just make a suggestion though? I think we can squeeze a bit more utility out of this list if we change one of these platforms. May I make this suggestion here on the screen? Because with IG-88D, you can get all the utility out of any Scum ship with the crew slot that you can get out of a droid ability. Because IG-88D gives his carrier the calculate action, it means that he can benefit from IG-88A's tokens, Plus, he also gives that ship to do the exact same thing, meaning that both ships can pass tokens to Guri, which is really potent. There are going to be some clutch situations where you need to give her 2 or even 3 calculate tokens. And with this kind of build, we also get the utility of having a bit of a controller. Now, I know Forlom is a control build as well. I just think with Forlom, you really want some upgrades to try and push that ability. Again, things like Elusive, anything that sort of benefits off stress in general or gives him the ability to do more stress is a very strong option on him. And the fact that he doesn't have any of that hurts him too much in my eyes. Pale of Godali, on the other hand, does not need a lot of build around to make his ability work. Sure, he'd love a copy of the Moldy Crow title, but there's no way we're going to fit that in this list. However, if he's not flying super aggressively, he still has the ability to take focus or evade tokens off your opponent's ships, and that's going to help Guri and IG-88A. It means that your opponent's going to have less utility to evade more, even neuter their attack somewhat. You could put that on IG-88A, you could give IG-88A a cannon or a device, you could give Pale of Godali a device. You could even think about giving something to Guri, but my point is, I think if we go for a cheaper option than the G1A Starfighter, we can get a little bit more utility into this list and essentially get all the same benefits. Remember, IG-88D essentially, in terms of game mechanics, turns any scum ship with a crew slot into a droid for the sake of working with IG-88A or Guri or any other archetype like that, and the Hawk is the cheapest platform that can do that. You can save points by taking off Contraband Cybernetics, changing the pilot on the Hawk, all kinds of stuff. There's definitely flex spots here, there's room to change some of these upgrades and pilots. But in terms of a bare bones list, I think this is probably going to work a little bit better. You get a bit more value overall out of your ships. But overall, I'm very keen to see what we can do with Guri. This kind of archetype, alongside RG-88A and something else, I think there is something there. I think this could be a meta list if it pays off. The fact of the matter is, we saw how powerful this kind of effect was with Paratani, and the fact that Guri is something unprecedented, a high initiative Star Viper. We didn't have anything like that in first edition, so I'm very keen to see what we can do with this platform. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. In the meantime, in the comment section, submit your lists. If you want to go on to yet another squad builder, that's a great way to do it, to make sure you get all the right costings and everything. Just if you want to do that, I suggest what you do is you view your list as a simple text thing and copy the text into the comments. If you copy a link into the comment, then YouTube automatically hides it and then I have to approve the comment. There's a bit more to do if we do that kind of stuff. So please text in the comments what lists you want me to have a look at, and I'll add it to my list and hopefully we'll get a chance to do them. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe, like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter and Reddit, and I'll catch you guys later.